In this course, we've looked at how energy works and how our body operates and these laws that our body is influenced by, like the law of gravity, right, where we have North Pole and South Pole in that first downward flow. We've also looked a little bit of the different laws that we're under in terms of law of the increase, that if we have a doshic pattern, if our vata is out of balance, we'll tend to keep going out of balance, and that's due to the compounding effect. We talked about this in terms of some samskaras in the daily routine as we cycle around day after day after day. The imbalance we have, say we have an imbalance, this would be an imbalance, we'll say in pitta, that'll become exacerbated and we'll start to go more in that direction and come out of sync in our circular rotation. So what I mean by that, say we start to skip our midday meal and we just go out of balance and we just start building up pitta, excess pitta in our constitution. We start to bring ourselves away from center in that way. Now I want to talk about this in terms of the law of the increase in pitta. So we have spanda and law of increase. The law of increase is simply this in Ayurveda. We say like increases like, and the opposites reduce each other. They bring down each other. So hot will bring down cold, soft will bring down sharp, mobile will bring down stable, stable will bring down mobile. The opposites are going to have a neutralizing effect on each other. The same, sharp will increase sharp, is going to have an aggravating effect. So I want to talk about this in terms of how to heal. This lesson is all going to be on healing. And if we see that there's a nature of imbalance in pitta, or maybe there's a nature of imbalance in vata, or maybe there's a nature of imbalance in kapha, and we're trying to find our way back to center, back to rhythm, back to wholeness, right? We're going to want to look at how did like increase like? How did we go out of balance? And often what happens, if we look at the natural pulsation of culture right now, what we find, here's the spanda, here's this spectrum of pulsation, is that our energy will often tend to go more out than it'll go in. So our energy will be pulled out instead of being pulled in and being pulled out. So we won't have the kind of time below the line. We'll say this is energy out and this is energy back in. This could be, for instance, work, and this could be energy of rest. We could also call this work, and we could call this play. If we've forgotten how to play, we're going to be out of balance, right? So this would be the more nourishing energy. Now, if that's out of balance over time, what happens is we become depleted. We start to lose our connection with joy, we lose our connection with spirit, we lose our connection with ourself, we lose connection with our intuition, and we start to feel frazzled, we start to feel worn out, we start to feel disconnected, and then we might fall into, again from the law of the increase, we might develop addictions. We might find, I need a glass of wine to wind down at the end of the day. I need a cup of coffee to get started in the middle of the day. I need some sweet treats to help me, reward myself for all the hard work I'm doing. And we start to develop habits that increase the imbalance themselves. So what I'm going to do is teach you a little bit about how to create a healing space. So how to create a healing space. We all want to have a sanctuary before we need it. And what I have found in coaching so many students and so many clients over time is that some people have a sanctuary and some people don't. And some people have a belief that they don't have room for a sanctuary and they don't have a need for a sanctuary. But we want to have a place to go that we can bring our energy into center. Many people will have an altar in their home if they come from a spiritual home. They'll construct an altar. If you are a regular yoga practitioner, you may have a place where you come to your mat and you use your yoga mat. I'm just going to write mat here. You use your mat as a place to check in with yourself. Others will have a place where they sit on their meditation cushion, right? And the idea here is that you want to have a sanctuary. You want to have a physical space where you go to check in with yourself. On the yogic path, on the path of awake living, we need a physical place that starts to build in energy, that starts to build and reflect the energies that we're wanting to cultivate in ourselves. Then if we have an experience where our energy is going out too much and it's not coming in enough, we now have a place to go, to check in, to tap in, to do a body scan, to relax, and to connect. And all of that starts the path of healing. Now, a few other practices I want to talk about besides having an altar, like where do we go when things get rough? We want to have a place that's identified for that, that we're using for that before we need it. There's other things that we can also do. In this whole lesson on how to heal, I find one of the biggest factors is having a healing environment. So there's a teaching, and it comes from behavioral science, on architecting your choices. You want to architect the choices that you want to be making. So if, for example, you're noticing that there's a lot of clutter in your atmosphere, there's just too much stuff around, you notice you don't feel relaxed at home, I would do a big purge of the house. I would use something like the book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo, and actually go through every physical object in your space. You start with your clothes, you move on to your books, then you go into your paper, then you go into your kimono, which is basically everything else, and then you go into your memorabilia. So you systematically go through every physical thing in your life, and you decide, is this something that sparks joy? Is this something that's part of my evolutionary path? Or am I just done with this? And you actually create an environment in which everything is on vibration with who you want to be now in the direction that you're going. This is so, so important that we create an environment in which we can architect our better choices. If there's stuff in our environment that's vibrating more at one of the more outdated versions of ourselves, it's going to suck us down, it's going to pull us back, we're going to feel less inspired, less connected, and we're simply going to make choices that are more part of our old outdated pattern than are part of the new alive pattern that we're wanting to reinforce and step into and to compound into where we go in the future. So what that might look like is we actually do find room in our house to have an altar, or to put our mat, or to have our cushion, that we refresh our altar with things that are deeply meaningful to us right now in this phase of life that we're in, that are reminding us of that which we're wanting to reinforce in our life, and that which we're wanting to reinforce the new identity that we're stepping into and the new habits that we're strengthening around our identity. So then if we look at some other practices in terms of things that'll help us heal, what to do with time when we have time and space to heal, we're going to want to do that practice of self-massage, and maybe not even just for a few minutes a day, but even 15 minutes a day of rubbing oil on our skin, of connecting and using our hands just to notice, oh, what feels good. Maybe learning a few of the acupressure points of like, oh, where does it feel good, to apply a little pressure and to make a few small circles. What essential oils are particularly resonant with me right now, and resonant with the different energy centers or chakras in my body, or the different energy points, the acupressure points in our system. So using our hands to heal and taking time to do longer self-massage is very, very helpful. Now I want to tell a story of a client I was working with who, and this has actually happened with a few clients, and I'm going to blend a few stories into one because it's a pattern that I see. And it's when someone has been so energetically out, their energy's been going out, they develop an autoimmune disease because there wasn't enough pulsation. If we remember the sponda, remember sponda's like spandex, and the amount of energy that goes out has to be equal and opposite to the energy that goes in. So that along this line, if this line's the middle, that we have an equal phase. If we don't, and we have more energy going out and not enough energy going in, then we start to become depleted. That's a very simple representation of this balance. And so this was the pattern, and she become very depleted. And usually what happens after that is there's a crash. Usually there's a lot of excitement, and it's like a pranic high, energy goes up, 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 and then it crashes, and all of a sudden you can't get the energy back up again. And all of a sudden they're down here, way down here, and they can't. And they want to feel this, They want everything to return to normal, but they can't because they're depleted. And some people will have this as chronic fatigue. Other people will have this as MS. Other people will have it as adrenal fatigue, right? There's a lot of different ways that this can manifest. Other people will be thyroid dysfunction, right? There's usually an imbalance. It's usually showing up diagnostically somewhere in the endocrine system. Or the person just simply feels out of sorts. Now, this can also happen with deep emotional trauma. It can happen through divorce. It can happen with death or loss. That all of a sudden, we're catapulted into a place where we're in the low of the low. Now, our culture, our modern culture, is very extroverted and is very externalized. And there's this sense of like we should always be upbeat and always be happy and always be ready to go. And that's what health is. But it's really not. That's only part of the picture. And the other part is that there's times when we really need to go inward. There's times when we need to let go of needing to be anyone for anyone else. There's times that we need to let go of the smiley, happy face and do some deep healing within. Often I've seen women that are postpartum that didn't get the kind of care they needed. They didn't take good enough care of themselves and they didn't have enough support. And they end up not being able to take very good care of themselves or their baby. And they end up needing to do this healing at a time when they're also needing to support their baby. So the consequences they can be really quite stark, and we want to pay attention to these cycles. So let's just talk about what happens when we're in here. We're in the low of the low, and it's a time that we need to heal. So there's times that we want to really know how to heal, and we want to know again how if we're in that lower energy and it feels like a lower vibration of healing. We want to know how to tap into it and actually how to release into it and to find the good, to find the joy of bringing ourselves back together, to integrating or restitching the parts of ourselves. And I want to tell a story, and I don't know it inside out, but it's a goddess story. It's a Greek goddess story. Return to the Goddesses, or the Descent to the Goddesses, where I learned it. And it's the story of Inanna and Ereshkigal. And you'll find that there are elements of this story that come from various cultures and other myths over time. So Inanna she's on her throne up here in heaven, and she has this beautiful crown, and she's bedecked with jewels, and she gets a call from the underworld where her sister Ereshkigal lives. And this is basically in the bowels of the earth, in hell, if you will. And she's just lost her husband. And so Inanna has to descend down to Ereshkigal in order to honor her sister in mourning. Now, the rules of this descent into the underworld, into this world which is not very extroverted and shiny and bright and not full of crowns and jewels, but is really just is very much the deep inner place, right? In order for her to descend down, she has to remove her crown, she has to remove her jewels, she has to leave her throne, and she does. And as she goes to the gateway of heaven into earth and in through the earth, she has to start to disrobe, and she has to let go of all of her outer garb. And as she descends through the different layers of earth, she has to give up her flesh, and she has to give up her musculature. She has to give up her bodily part. She has to give up her flesh. And so by the time she actually makes it down to Ereshkigal, down into the deep inner bowels of the life force, she's nothing. She's literally dissolved. She has no identity, nothing that's connected to this goddess, and she's just her own essential nature. And her sister picks her up and literally impales her over a spike, and that is her warm welcome from her sister who's in deep mourning. Now, there's a lot of elements to this story. What's beautiful about this story is it talks a lot about the feminine and the descent and the unwinding, and this is what the energy of healing is all about. It's not shiny, it's not happy, it's not extroverted. There's ugly phases of it. It's deep, it's gory. By the time she gets down here, she's in the skin and blood and bones, and there's just not much left of her physical body. And she needs to remake herself again to ascend back to heaven. And when she does, She is made anew, and she knows her own inner core strength in a way that she had no idea before she made the descent and before she reinvented herself. So the reason I tell that story is, A, it's a great book, Descent to the Goddess. It's a great story, and there's another book, Finding the Goddess Within, that tells the same story in great detail. But it's a very important part to know that mythology comes from our psyche. And so this idea of having these times where we dip down, where we go through a deep healing process, that is part of life. There is nothing wrong with needing time to heal. The healing diet looks very different than the festive celebratory diet. The healing diet is a liquid diet. It's mostly broths. If you eat meat, it's bone broths. If you don't eat meat, it's root vegetable broths, and broths that have some stalks and some leaves and some spices in it as well. What we want to know is that we have to have the basic tools to bring our system down to zero. How do we go and allow ourselves, our systems, to return to zero, to return to the very slow healing vibration? The liquid diet will help, bringing our senses inward and letting go of the sort of shiny, flashy world, letting go of external engagements, letting go of scheduling, letting go of friendships temporarily, while we just return all of our energy to center. Returning to our mat, doing body scans, doing a lot of very slow restorative yoga practices, having time for corpse pose where we actually practice dying. In corpse pose we practice letting go of the body and entering deep stillness and bringing awareness just to the center, just to the middle. These are the practices of healing, and it's so important to know how to do this. In every detoxification cycle I teach in the Yogi Detox, we do a little mini version of this little mini version of checking in and of letting go. And what happens on the other end is we emerge, and we emerge anew, and we emerge more deeply aligned and more deeply empowered. So other practices you can have during healing times is picking up skills like doing self-massage, doing self-reiki, doing yoga nidra, learning these subtle energy practices that will help you grow a deeper, more intrinsic energy, a more integrated energy. So I hope these tips are helpful in terms of how to heal and how to start to tap into that. You want a sanctuary, you want a place in your space that when the proverbial waste matter hits the proverbial fan, you have a place to go and you know what to do, and you know that it's normal. You know that it's part of the cycle of life, it's part of the cycle of healing. So my hope is in this course on Ayurveda for yogis, on awake living, that we are learning a bit about the most basic ways to understand how energy works, how the daily rhythm works, how to attune, how to heal, how to have a more intergenerational life perspective, how to more deeply nourish ourselves and how to more deeply nourish others, how to be in right relationship with our own life. So I just want to end with a very brief talk on the disease and the disease process and what this is, and to describe, so we have a deeper understanding of the doshas. This is a bucket, and regardless of our constitution, if we bring in energy, we bring in life force energy, we bring in all of our experiences, and all that comes into the bucket, our day-to-day, what we do. Say I'm a Pitta type person and I have Pitta type imbalances. I'm overly focused. I'm overly pushing I'm pushing the envelope. I'm burning the candle at both ends. What will happen is Pitta will start to build up in my bucket. And if I do this day after day, year after year, season after season, what happens is first there's just really slight imbalances. I might have loose stools. I may have hyperacidity. Then I may have develop psoriasis. Then I might develop some other disorders. And what happens is over time the bucket, it gets so full, it starts to overflow. And as it overflows, the dosha starts to leave the digestive tract and it starts to flow more in the bloodstream of the body. And now the imbalances move deeper, and as the imbalances move deeper, and we keep doing the same darn thing, we keep pushing the envelope, we keep burning the candle at both ends, what happens is the doshas look for a place to land. And so they're going to look for a weak area of the body. And say for you, that is your thyroid gland. What happens is that excess pitta, it starts to go to the thyroid gland, and it basically, it plants a seed. and it starts to build up. So then the body has a place to start dumping the excess pitta, and it starts to create qualitative changes in the fabric of that tissue. So the thyroid tissue itself starts to develop a pitta imbalance, and we see inflammation and we see destruction of that tissue. And over time, that seed, again, if we don't change our diet and lifestyle, if we don't get the kind of healing that we need, it starts to grow a tree. And this is the tree of disease in Ayurveda. If we keep doing this, we could end up with needing to get our thyroid removed or being on Synthroid for the rest of our life, etc. And those would be the fruits of the disease. So what I want you to see here is that it's the doshas, it's the vata and pitta and kapha, those energies, which are the energies of the life force. They are also the energies of disease. So if they build up in wrong relationship to each other, and we have lots of little signs and symptoms along the way before we get this full manifest disease process. If we start to witness, oh wow, I'm slightly out of balance, what can I shift in my daily routine to bring me back into balance? What that starts to do is it starts to erase the disease. It starts to unwind the doshas. And we can erase the tree of disease if we're not in it too far, and we can start to empty our bucket and live a life in alignment. And so that's really what Ayurveda is about. It's the science of life. It's the science of living in rhythm, of living in awake life, of living in sync, in alignment with the life force energy, of learning and growing as we age, of being an interconnected part of the intergenerational life process from preconception all the way through death, and helping others on this journey in this experience. Namaste.